Hi. Hello and welcome back to... No, I'm just kidding, guys. Hi and welcome back. You guys already know me. I'm Chef Michael. You probably recognize me from Instagram. Maybe you have my cookbook. Maybe you don't. But this podcast is going to feel a little different. What I wanted to do here is dive in a little deeper. So we're not going to be talking about food all that much, even though we got some very knowledgeable foodies in the season. This is really about diving deeper into the food industry, into diet culture, and kind of having some real talk about what's happening right now. So welcome to the podcast, and thank you so much for being here. I got a very special guest today, but before we get into that, if you want some more information about this podcast or about any of the other episodes, go to chefmichael.com/podcast, and that's chef-michael.com/podcast. And if you are enjoying what's happening here, we also have bonus episodes. So basically what happens is after I interview our guest right here, I kick the guest out and just me, you, and the camera talk really about what happened. We reflect, we dive in, just a little bit about what I think about what was said. And those episodes can be found at patreon.com/chefmichael. You also support the podcast by doing so, because for just a few dollars a month, you get all those bonus episodes. You also get some other free goodies. So definitely join me over at patreon.com/chefmichael right after this episode. And of course, thank you so much to our sponsor, Redmond Real Salt, for providing support for the podcast. Guys, it's the best salt in the game. I'm not even kidding. It sits next to me at the stove every single day. It tastes great. It's easy to cook with, but I think almost more importantly is the fact that it's completely natural, made here in the USA from a dried up seabed in Utah, and it's packed with over 65 trace minerals. So when we talk about the importance of getting in those electrolytes on a keto diet or generally any other reason, it is a great way to do it through your diet just by cooking with a really nice salt like Redmond salt. So definitely go to redmond.life where you can place an order online for their salt. And of course, they have other cool products too, like electrolyte supplements, toothpaste, face masks, like all kinds of other lifestyle things. So definitely check out redmond.life, not .com, .life. And if you put in the discount code Chef Michael, you'll get 15% off. Now, it is time to dive in to our guest today. We have a very special person, two-time best-selling author, and just a really fantastic, inspiring person, Suzanne Ryan, also new co-founder of a keto food company. So we got lots to dive into here. I'm going to get a little sip of this coffee, and I'm going to bring her up on camera. Welcome, Suzanne Ryan. Suzanne, hello and welcome. How the hell are you?
Hey, I'm good. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting in a little bit of caffeine today. Are you a coffee drinker?
I am, but I actually had to switch to decaf, which I swore I would never do. But I had to switch to decaf because I was having heart palpitations. So had to switch. I think I was hitting the caffeine a little too hard.
Yeah, I don't know. I probably could get away with decaf. I don't know if it's actually the caffeine or just the habit.
Yeah,
But
like a
I like the
warm,
flavor.
cozy. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just I want everything, like my food and my beverages. I want everything to be as strong as possible. I don't really like beer. I want to drink neat whiskey, and
Yeah.
coffee. I go the darkest, most concentrated espresso possible.
Yeah.
Everything just
I'm
for
like the
me needs to
opposite. I think I like cream more than I like coffee.
That's funny. I do like cream
Yeah.
too, though. I do get that.
Yeah.
Well, welcome. So I gave a little kind of snippet into who you are, but it can't all be summed up in a few lines. Obviously, really, really passionate member of the keto community. You've written 2 amazing cookbooks. One of them I've happily owned since it first came out, and has been a
Nice.
part of my cookbook collection since I first started keto. So I'm really excited to talk to you today, and I'm very lucky that we've kind of gotten to know each other over the past couple of years in this space. So
Yeah.
welcome, Suzanne.
Thank you. Yeah, it's so funny because I love having new people come in, and then it's amazing how quickly I feel like we all become like such a big family, and then we all have so much in common. And I especially love that you talk so much about empathy and vulnerability and positivity and all that. And I'm like, yes, we need that so much.
Yeah, I think it's hard because obviously with social media, um it's tricky. It's a tricky beast, and I think you probably understand this because it's like personally speaking, I have found so much connectivity and accountability in a lot of amazing personal parts of Instagram and social media.
Yeah.
But of course, like you're an entrepreneur, you have cookbooks, you started a new company recently, so there's also like this business piece, and we have to kind of merge and find a way to weave it all together.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of interesting because I actually was an ultrasound tech before I got into the keto space, and I had no intention at all of doing what I'm doing now. So like this is all still I'm still like wrapping my head around it. And like I had never dreamed of writing a cookbook, never dreamed of launching a product. So like all this stuff is just kind of like how like you're afraid to do a lot of stuff and then you do something and it's like, oh, that wasn't actually that bad. And I actually really liked it because I was helping people and connecting and like I actually am capable of doing things. And so I really have had this journey of like not only losing weight, but getting out of my own way to actually enjoy and live my life.
Oh, you're speaking my language. Getting out of your own way. Yes. And I'm right there with you. This was never in the plans. Like when I
Yeah.
started Instagram, I didn't even put my face on it. It was just called
Yeah.
Keto Homemade. It was just like keto
Oh, no way.
chefy food. Like that was like way back. I had no intention of this either. But I will say I didn't know that about you specifically. We never talked about this, but
Yeah.
to me it doesn't surprise me in that I can tell with you there's sort of like an authenticity and just sort of like a humility, I guess you could say, that I've always felt about you in this space. And a lot of people will often ask, or I see people asking in other platforms, like, well, how do we grow our social media, and how do we like, I want to be a published author, and I want to do all these things, and it's sort of funny. But like, do you feel sometimes like the answer is by not trying? Because it's like,
Yeah. Because
it's
I
like
feel
sometimes when
like,
you try, go
yeah,
ahead, go
I
ahead.
I totally agree with you. Like you were literally hitting the nail on the head. Like it's almost kind of like when people are like, "Oh, I want to be successful. I want to be successful." And they're focusing so much on trying to hit these certain marks or be successful that they're missing out on like what the beauty of the process is and like what the core of all of it is connection and like building that community and having that support system and learning and growing and shifting like I don't know about you, I'm sure, but like when we first started keto, I was so focused on the diet, and now I'm like, that's the like, it's the least interesting thing about everything that I've learned along the way. So it is just really interesting because some people do ask me like, how do I grow a social following? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I didn't try. Like,
Right.
honestly, when I first started, I didn't tell anybody about my YouTube channel or socials because I was like mortified that people I know would like know what I was doing. So it was definitely an interesting thing. But yeah, I think it's just like follow the passion and don't focus on that because then you're just going to be like
Right.
really hustling for the wrong things.
Right. Well, and I think like now I was thinking back to my words when I said like, sort of don't try, not to say don't work hard. Cause
Yeah.
you're one of the hardest people I know. I put in like more than full-time work into
Oh,
something for years that I never made money. It's a hustle. And so it's not to say don't try in terms
yeah.
of work. It's just the goal shouldn't be like, I want to be an influencer or I want to be
Yes.
famous, right? Like the goal should be, I want to create something real. I want to provide value in some way. I want to learn and like put myself out. I don't know, like
Yeah.
it's kind of an interesting subject, but when I can feel, and I don't know about you, and again, this isn't like throwing shade against any person, but I think you can feel in social media when people are trying to
Yeah.
become, you know what I mean?
For sure, for sure. I mean, I think, when I look at kind of the bigger picture, especially too, is like when keto started getting really big, then it really started blowing up where people were like, oh, I see like kind of a space in this to like be an influencer. But I guess for me, it's kind of funny. It's like the whole accidental influencer thing. And like you said, I almost kind of feel like the people who really want to be that, like I can kind of see through it. And then the people who really want to help and really want to connect and like really are like full of passion to help other people, like especially to turn like pain or struggle into something positive, like you can feel it.
Yeah, yeah. And it's not to say that always works either. I think one of the other problems with trying on social media is like there really is no exact answer to it. Because like
Yeah.
I do know some content creators who like I think should have a million followers and like
Yeah.
just don't. And then there's some people that quite frankly confuse me how they have so many followers. So I think it's
Like,
like
how is this
it
possible?
it's definitely an interesting topic, and I think there's been times when I've really personally struggled with it. I don't know if you've struggled there. I'm sure you're not always motivated to like be 100% on social media. It's tough. There's
Yeah.
definitely days where I struggle with it.
Yeah, I mean, I go through phases of times where I'm like, I really love this and I love social media. And then there's
Hmm.
days where I'm like, it just feels off and it feels like it's changed so much and I want to throw my phone in a river. But then I kind of keep coming back to like, why did I start this and what is the purpose and like, who am I trying to help? And I show up for those people. But yeah, I definitely have days where I'm like, I just need to shut off my phone and like have some like mental health space.
Well, and truthfully, we all should do that, influencer or not. We should all get away from our phone a little
Yeah,
bit here and there. I
for
know
sure.
I turned off Instagram notifications like maybe a year into doing this before I
Yeah.
was even like whatever you want to say. Just those pings, those things popping up are just it's like it's not for me.
Yeah, did you see the Social Network documentary where they talked
I
about how like,
did.
yeah, it was mind-blowing to see even
I
the
did.
creators were like, we didn't intend for like likes to like cause depression for people and like all these things that were created for
Right.
something really simple turned into something so complex.
Yeah, and I know like Instagram keeps going in and out of dabbling with this idea of getting rid of likes. I'm all about it, but
I
it
am
just seems
too.
like they're not pulling the trigger on it. I don't know. I just saw they did another round of tests with that, but um it
I
doesn't
actually
seem
think
like they're
my
owning it.
profile is in the test of it right now. Yesterday I went in and it did not show me likes. Like it told me like a couple of my friends who liked it, but there was no total count. So I think they are
Hmm.
still testing it because I think
Yeah,
mine's in and out of it.
they're definitely playing with it. It's tough. I mean, like you said though, like there's days where I'm like, oh, this is just not for me. Like I just like I'm not interested. I've never really fed off of like the attention piece or whatever. Like I
Yes,
never wake up like super excited. And sometimes I feel this pressure, like believe it or not, I'm not interesting every day. Like thinking about making stories and people who are like microdotting every day. I'm so envious. I'm like,
I
man, there are
know.
just some days where I am not interesting and I don't know what to do. And I just,
I
I don't make
know.
a story.
I
Um,
like some days envy the people who can just so naturally story. Like I always feel so awkward when
yeah.
I do it. And but you know, I always consider myself to be kind of like a high functioning introvert. Like I love people and I love connection, but I also love having like my space and my time and quiet.
Same. 100%. Yeah, no, it's fun though. But then it's like the other side of this is like, I'm sure you get this too. Like when people actually make food from our blog or our book and like are so proud of the food they've created, or you get those nice messages and then it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, this is real. There
Yeah.
is real stuff that happens out of this.
Yeah.
Um and like that brings me back for sure.
Yeah, and you know, I think one of the things I've pinpointed over the last like 5 or 6 years is that like sometimes it's really easy to be like, oh, I'm not doing enough, or I'm not making an impact, or I'm not connecting. And because it's like after a while, the comments and all that stuff just kind of fade into like white noise. Not that like you don't appreciate them, but it's like when
Right.
people are constantly like, thank you, you've helped me, like you start just getting kind of used to that. And like sometimes you can lose a grip on how much you actually are impacting people. So it's really good to like refresh and remind yourself. And I think once we're past like the pandemic, it will be easier because like when I would go to like trade shows or book tours or any kind of like a keto meetup, then you're like reinvigorated of like, this is like the thing, like
Yeah.
this is the connection. This is like the people that I'm helping and connecting with. So it's good to kind of refresh and remember that.
Yeah, bring humanity back to it all,
Hmm.
because there is real stuff happening. And I
Yeah.
know, I've definitely been able to see the impact you've had. I think you've had a pretty dramatic sort of journey through health. I think all of our
Yeah.
journeys, um, whether weight loss journey or just sort of a health fitness type journey, a lifestyle journey, like we've all kind of had a very unique version of it that's uniquely our own. But
Yeah.
I'd love to kind of hear your journey, because I've heard you speak in a few different platforms, and you really struggled with some like yo-yo dieting and stuff, right? Like this is
Yeah.
definitely not an easy thing. Like one day you just quickly found success on keto. So walk me through a little bit of that. How did you kind of get to
Yeah.
today, at least in terms of health?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was a struggle. And, looking back, I can really see that so much of my like self-esteem and self-worth was like totally in the dumps because of my weight. I had a really rough family life and upbringing. We were like very, very poor. Once my parents got divorced, I was mostly raised by my dad, who was a single father. And we lived in like garages that were converted to apartments and like a breezeway at one point that didn't have a kitchen. And
Wow.
like I mean, my dad is like so amazing, like the things that he was able to overcome. But like because of our circumstances, it was really cheap a lot of times to like go through the McDonald's drive through and get like a cheeseburger. And he didn't really know how to cook. So we lived on fast food. And I have one brother and he ate the same thing that I did, but he was always fit and popular. And I'm like, how is this even fair or
Hmm.
possible? But the one thing that I can kind of see that I started doing that he didn't is I developed emotional eating habits. Like food was like my comfort. It was like I loved it. I was excited about it. It made me feel like good and invigorated when like everything else in my world was falling apart. And it was just like a steadfast companion. So I think, I didn't realize that for a long time. And I tried everything. I mean, you name it, I've tried it, from every diet under the sun to pills, programs. I mean, I went to places and got appetite suppressants and B12 shots. I mean, everything I tried, and nothing was ever lasting because none of it was ever really a lifestyle change. And I really didn't have my mind wrapped around like the mindset part. Like I was just kind of like, I need to lose weight and then I'm going to be happy. And then when I like was like, no, it's more than that. And I was able to combine both like getting some counseling and focusing on my mindset and like my mental health and changing to a lifestyle that I could actually stick to. Like that's when it really changed.
Well, this is tricky, right? Because and I do agree with you. And you actually kind of touched on this earlier when you spoke, when you said like the diet's sort of like the last piece, that the
Yeah.
least relevant piece of what you've learned, which is funny because of course that's what we focus on so much,
Yeah.
especially in like the diet community and in keto and all this stuff. It's all about like eating and macros. Um, but there's so much more to it. But here's the trap. It's like, yes, we need to work on ourselves, but we have this like conundrum of, I need to feel better about myself in order to get healthy, but I
Yeah.
need to like get healthy in order to feel better about myself, and it's very hard. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like
Yeah.
it's very
It-
tricky. So how do you kind of start? I mean, not that there's a universal answer, but how does someone even start?
Well, I think it's going to look different for everyone, and I think that eventually, like people have to be ready for themselves. Like I know my whole life, like my mom would say, like, "Oh, come on, like let me get you help. You need to lose weight." Or my brother would like, I mean, now he's sorry for it, but would totally tease me and pick on me and say like, "What's so hard about it? Just stop eating." But I
Mm,
think I think the two factors are like you have to be ready and then like having an actual reason. Like we talk about people having like their why moment. And for me, it was like the birth of my daughter. And then also I had a friend who was like really dear to me and she had a son and he ended up having a terminal disease. And he only lived to be 1 years old. And when I saw him like not be able to walk and like get to the point where like he eventually died, I was like, what am I doing? Like I have a healthy body except for what I'm doing or not doing, and I am taking my health completely for granted. And I was like, you know what? Like today, I have to make this change, and I need to stop being so worried about like, oh, I want to look a certain way, I want to feel a certain way, and I want to be here to see my daughter grow up, and I want to live in his honor. So I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. Like I've had
Hmm.
all the excuses. Like it is time to change. So for me, it was like that why moment of like wake up call.
Yeah. And I guess I've seen a lot of people who think that their why is like, why? Because I need to lose weight, or my why is because I want to be 150 pounds, not 200 pounds, but it's sort of abstract. I think it is
Yeah.
about digging deeper for sure. The why, like, why is not loving the person in the mirror is not enough of a why, in my opinion. Because I learned this for myself the hard way. Um, if you don't love yourself before you lose weight, you're not going to after.
Yeah.
And I feel pretty strongly about that. Like I'm still working on that 3 years in.
100%.
It's very complicated. And
Yeah.
and it's like I think that there's a lot of us where, like, I know for a long time I sort of said, "Oh, like I'm just meant to be big. I'm never going to be skinny or whatever."
Yeah.
And we sort of have a defeatist mindset. Like, I can't do this. I'm never going to be able to do this. And when in reality, I think that there's something happening deeper that causes that. Like I think you hit the nail on the head with the emotional eating, and I want to
Hmm.
dive into that too in a second. But um, working on the mental health piece is so important, and it's hard for people to talk about. It's still so
Yeah.
taboo. Um, I see this a lot with like men, especially on social media, who like don't seem to address this stuff at all.
Mhm.
um it's tricky, but yeah, like really, like I didn't start doing therapy until I was 30.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. I don't know why that was something that I didn't think was okay.
I think for men, we have such a societal norm of like, suck it up, like, be a man.
Hmm.
Like, I talk to my husband about this a lot because, like, he's super open about talking about mental health. And he's like, I just always remember people, it's like, didn't make space for me as a man to have like lows or to like, it's almost just kind of like, I mean, the terms like man up. It's like, there's all this pressure on men to be like strong and bold and fearless all the time. And I think we got to break down that walls to like everybody's mental health is important.
Yeah, yeah. And there's definitely like I think what you were talking about, like you had a tough childhood, and um I think that stuff really matters because I don't think for me it was as much of a tough childhood. But I think the habits we form as kids really do stick with us as adults. Like I know
Yeah.
that a lot of the triggers that I have for around my emotional eating are definitely still there from when I was a kid.
Yeah.
There's nothing new about any of that. And like even
Yeah.
to today, keto or not, like yeah, I don't know. It's tricky.
Yeah, actually, one of the things that I learned in counseling that was so pivotal to me is that when we're growing up, we'll be in situations and we form these opinions at ages when our brain is not fully developed, where we're not really processing like all the complex layers about things. So, like, for example, for me, when my parents got divorced, like, I thought it was my fault. Like it wasn't my fault. It had nothing to do
Hmm.
with me. But as a kid, you're like, well, maybe if I would have been better, or maybe if I would have cleaned my room, or maybe if I would have done better in school and not had my parents fighting about me struggling in school, like maybe that would have been it. And it's crazy how much like you carry the guilt or disassociation of things that actually don't belong to you your whole life unless you actually face them as an adult and look at them in retrospect and be like, wow, like I can see how as a kid I felt that way, but as an adult, like let me like open up the space to heal about this thing and let go of what didn't belong to me, take accountability for what did, and like grow and move forward.
Right, right. Well, and I think you mentioned this earlier too. Like, at least for me, you're right. There was like this moment where I was like, okay, now I'm ready. Um,
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people I see in in the health space, like they want to lose weight because they either need to from a medical perspective, their doctor, or from, a personal perspective, they don't love the
Yeah.
person they are. And often that's not enough. So we kind of look for these quick fixes. Um, and I think it's like a lot of the diets don't work, first of all, but then you pair that with like this idea that dieting is about willpower, when I think like we know by now that willpower really doesn't work. Like
Hmm.
you can have willpower for a month or 2 months, but you're not going to have willpower the rest of your life.
Exactly.
Um, and it's really interesting when you start diving into, like, for me, I know you mentioned your why was sort of a moment where you decided to be the mother you need to be
Hmm.
for your child. For me, my why was like a little bit darker. It was sort of like hitting rock bottom. It was sort of hitting the fact that, like, I'm 30 and I hurt when I wake up because my body hurts from being my size, and like my feet hurt from just walking and existing. And
Yeah.
um I hate it, and I hate me, and like I'm done. I'm done with this. I didn't even want my pictures taken. I don't
Hmm.
have a before picture because, like, the idea of even seeing what I looked like at my biggest was so painful. And so
Yeah.
for me, it was like, I'm done being in pain. Like, it's painful physically, but much more so emotionally to
Yeah.
be big. And for me, it was like, I'm done. And I had to do that. I'll be honest. I was starting to get pressure a little bit from like my parents. They were getting worried about my health,
Yeah.
and it just annoyed me when they would say like, "Hey, we have diabetes in our family. I want you to be careful." And like, it annoyed me. It hurt my feelings, but more so, it was like bugging me, but it didn't motivate me at all.
Yeah.
And you mentioned your brother kind of picking on you. That stuff, like, I don't know, it's almost counterproductive.
Oh, yeah. And then, like, the more you don't talk about how hard that is, like I totally resonate with everything you say, because like I hit that part and I still wasn't enough. Like, you would think that that low would have been enough, but like for some reason I almost just got used to living in that low, like being depressed and hurting. And Um, but I think the thing is like the less we talk about it, the more the shame grows. Like, so like as a
Hmm.
kid and growing up, like I didn't say anything to anybody. And if anyone were like in a store, if I was shopping for something and a salesperson was like, "Oh yeah, let me find your size," I would literally like duck and run out. Like I had so much shame that I think I was just like buried under a blanket of it.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. Well, and that's what I was kind of like. I think that's what's really tricky, is that like when we're in a space of depression and we're in a space of shame, it's
Yeah.
also very hard to turn around and be like, I am motivated to like do better for myself. So these things don't align when they really need to.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes it so hard. But I think for a lot of us, keto, for me at least, I won't speak for you, but keto did make it easier, sort of from a from a pure diet perspective. Yes, I was
For
ready.
sure.
Yes, I had the why. There's also a sense of like, oh wait, I can actually eat my way through this rather than deprive my way through this. So that did
Hmm.
help. I don't know if you felt that way too.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I recognized is like before starting keto, I was hungry all the time. Like I could literally eat a full meal and then someone could say like, "Hey, I'm going to lunch. Like you want to come?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, let's go." Like I was always down to
Mm.
eat. And I when I switched to keto and I was keto adapted, it was the very first time in my life that I was like, "Wow, like this is what it's like to feel like satiated with your food." And I think breaking it up with sugar and not being in that vicious cycle of craving food all the time, like it was just a game changer for me.
Yeah. Well, how do you personally, I guess this podcast taken a twist in the vulnerability space. How do you personally deal with emotional eating? Because if you're like me, it's not over today, right?
Yeah, it's not. I feel like it's just like anything else where like some days you have good days and some days you have bad days. And on the good days, you celebrate it. And on the bad days, you give yourself some grace, but you also are accountable to it so that you don't get stuck in this like vicious cycle of like backpedaling. And I feel like for me, I actually felt like I had a really great handle on all of that, like for the most part. I mean, of course, we still struggle. Like we're always going to be a work in progress, but I had just formed all these new things that I did. Instead of emotional eating, I would go for a walk, or I would go get a massage, or I would go out to lunch with one of my friends. So I had these like built-in replacements of things to do instead of eat. And then when the pandemic happened, I was like, uh-oh, like
Hmm.
this is like a whole new world of like I'm scared, I'm stressed, I'm maxed for time, like I was moving cross country and I was like, I definitely started struggling with it again. And I think for a moment you kind of freak out because you're like, uh-oh, like I don't want to go down this path again. But then you do have to stop and realize that like we're never going to be perfect. And in striving for that perfect, then we're constantly feeling like we're never good enough. So that's where I had to catch myself because at the core of like the most painful parts of the way that I feel, I always felt not good enough. So that's the thing that I try to separate. Like the way that I eat and the way that I look has no bearing or negotiation on my value. And
Hmm.
that's
Interesting.
that's the work in progress for me. Like cuz it's still not perfect. I'm still, there's so many pressures of looking a certain way and eating a certain way and having everything dialed in. But just kind of finding that sweet spot of like giving yourself grace but also staying accountable to what you really want and what your goals are.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like, if you strive, I agree with you. It's like we can't be perfect all the time. And
No.
this is a dietary discussion, but this also does kind of just apply to life a little bit too, right? Like, a friend of mine told me pretty recently because I was like stressing out about it doesn't even matter these video things, and I wanted them to be really perfect and this and that. And he
Yeah.
was like, perfection is the enemy of good, which I thought
Mhm.
was kind of made me take pause because it's like when we strive to be perfect, basically, we're going to set ourselves up for a lot of
Yeah.
failure, a lot of stress, a lot of disappointment, when in fact, it's just better to be good.
Yeah.
Good all the time is better than perfect once. It's not sustainable to be perfect and certainly not sustainable to eat perfectly for the rest of our life.
No.
um and so that really helped me even in like a non-dietary way just to understand that, so I think that's really important.
Yeah, for sure.
um
Yeah, it is kind of funny that whole like progress, not perfection is talked about a lot, but like of course with our like social media and like media in general, like there's so much perfect pushed onto us. And we have to stop and remember like, whoa, like we don't know anything about behind the scenes. Like we got to stop the comparison game. We got to focus on ourselves and our own life and our own struggles and our own triumphs and like not worry about what's going on in someone else's lane because that's I feel like so many people get sucked into that comparison game.
yeah, no, it's true. And it's like one of the things that I think you mentioned earlier, you kind of called me out that I've been working on being a little more vulnerable on socials. And it's true because what I started realizing was that not only was I my whole life always trying to like only show the good parts. I never thought I was perfect and I never like faked anything, but
Yeah.
like I would never want to share like my mess ups. I'd never want to talk about that stuff. I'd always
Yeah.
just want to um share my strengths, and I thought that by just being a rock star, you know, was what would inspire people on social media or whatever. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
what I started realizing is that that's actually not super helpful to people. What's helpful for people is to see that, like, no, I'm a human. Like, I don't like what I see in the mirror even today. I don't always like I still today have weird stuff going shopping for clothes like you just mentioned, right? Like these things don't go away. And
Mhm.
sharing those stories I think is really important. And I encourage people now more than ever as I'm learning this, that being really open and vulnerable, because weight loss is not pretty.
No.
um it's not easy, and it's not pretty. Like it's an emotional ride. There's like these very distinct moments where it's not going well.
Hmm.
I'm sure there were times when it wasn't going well for you and you figured it out, whatever that was causing that
Yeah.
that moment for you. And I don't know, I don't know your exact journey, but I can guess that it wasn't just a line down on the scale, right?
Yeah. Well, I
um
think the thing that was the most shocking to me is I had like built up this, like, I romanticized weight loss so much.
right.
But like more importantly, I really had this idea of like a finish line. Like once I get to my goal weight, like that's it. Like I am free from this. I'm done. I don't have to worry about
Hmm.
it anymore. Like, and it's kind of crazy, like when you think about that saying, like the grass isn't greener on the other side, it's greener where you water it, and you're like, oh shoot, like all this stuff and everything that I've built up, like I should have been really investing in loving myself, taking care of my mental health, all that stuff. Like no matter what size I am, like instead of just saying like once I get to this point, I'm going to be happy. How many of us tell ourselves that? Like once I get this dream job, I'm going to be happy. Once I get, a nice husband, I'm going to be happy. Once I, have money, I'm going to be happy. It's like we always put off these ideas of what we need to be happy. And it's kind of like what you said earlier. It's like we kind of have to have that before we can have the things that we actually want anyways, because if we're not filling our own cup, we have nothing to pour to all those other things that we want to accomplish.
Right. So how do we do this? Okay, so let's talk practically for a second, because hell, I'm still working on this. You can't fake it. Like, I know we see a lot of this. Um, we see enough memes and enough things on the internet, like teaching us to be more positive and kind of like, we know we all need to be more positive, right? I think that's
Yeah.
probably I know that I should see in the mirror what everybody else sees, if that makes sense. I
Hmm.
know that I should do these things. I know I should work on, like, I guess what I'm saying is, how do you actively do this? You personally, like, what are some of the methods that you've used to work on your self love um, in your life over the last few years?
So, two main things. One is I think one of the most important things is to normalize knowing that you're going to have days where you don't like the way you look, or that you feel down about yourself, or you're depressed. Like I think we're so busy trying to be like, oh, I want to love myself and be happy all the time and be super positive and pumped. Like we need to normalize those great days as much as we have struggles. Because again, like if we think that we need to be happy and perfect and love ourselves all the time, like it's not achievable. And then when we hit a time where we're like, oh gosh, this isn't happening today, we're like, oh no, what am I doing wrong? Like you're not doing anything wrong. Like we all go through highs and lows. So I think normalizing that is very important. And then the second thing, I'm sure you're aware of Brene Brown. She's like my shiro. Like I love her so much.
Okay, by the way, can I humble brag? She just started
Yeah.
following me on Instagram
Oh
out of
my
nowhere.
gosh.
I didn't even know. A friend of mine texted me and was like, Brene Brown just liked your post. And I was like,
You're like, what?
what?
Yeah.
Humble
She's
brag. If
in,
she's listening, I would love to have you on the
no. She's
podcast.
she's amazing. I actually got to meet her in San Francisco. She invited me to come to one of her talks, and we went and like sat down, and her assistant came out to get me, and I got to meet her, and she is just as incredible in person as she is online.
Yeah.
Like she's the real deal, like incredible person.
Yeah. I'm
Um,
like obsessed.
yeah, me too. I like all of her books are like on the shelf behind me on the ground. I have like a whole book, your books on there too.
Mm.
All my books down there. Um, but one of the things she taught me, which I literally say it to myself at least once a week, is don't go through life looking for proof that you don't belong, because you will always find it. And I'm like,
Mm.
oh, how true is that? Like the
Whoa.
things that we search for, the things that we focus so heavily on, like if we want to be, if we want to find proof that we're not good enough, thin enough, rich enough, skilled enough, like you name it, you're going to find it. Like we have very critical brains, if in some ways it's survival, but in other ways it's super detrimental. So then when that happens, I'm like, okay, what happens if we actually see proof that we are good enough, that we are making an impact, that we have an important mission of connection and helping others. And like, what if we focus on that instead? And that's just something, when something pops in my head where I'm like, oh, I didn't do this good enough, or like, with launching Defy, I'm like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I'm like, don't go through life looking for proof that this, it's like you have to stop yourself and be like, why am I? It's almost like you're seeking it out of like, uh-oh, am I not good enough? Like, and that's really detrimental. So that's what I try to do. I pause and I like play my inner Brene message.
Hmm. Oh, I love her.
Yeah, me too.
That's cool. Yeah, it's tricky. I learned one of the tools that I've used this therapy, as we've both kind of hinted at
Yeah. Yeah,
today.
I've done
I think,
therapy.
yeah, definitely being able to actually talk through this some of this stuff with a professional does
Yeah.
help. I think one of the things that I learned from my therapist was sort of uh, this idea of catching myself with this self-critical nature, because I'm definitely my worst critic.
For sure.
And he sort of presented me with this idea that we exist, like our brain exists, we're in our own house, we're kind of
Hmm.
in our own house, and there's a glass window, and the way that somebody standing on the outside of that house would see us through that window is impossible. It's different than the way we're inside of the room. So we have all this extra information kind of swirling around, a
Yeah.
lifetime of kind of information swirling around this house that's sort of damaging our perspective of ourselves.
Hmm.
Whereas if we were able to step out, if we were able to walk out of that house and just see what everybody else sees through the glass, it's sort of like that's the truth,
Yeah.
and being able to distance ourselves from that a little bit and just catch ourselves and say, like, am I saying this because I really think it's true? Just sort of like being able to stop and pause. And that moment of pause um, has been really, really, I think, life changing for me. And we see this a lot. Like, I think there's a couple reasons why people who have lost weight post before and after pictures, right? Obviously it's a source of pride. It's something we should celebrate. I think if somebody's made a change in their life, it's beautiful to be able to celebrate that.
Hmm.
Obviously there's the downside. I think there's people who use before and after pictures for marketing and other things. That's not the
Yeah.
point of this discussion.
Totally.
um, but I don't love before and after pictures because I think it sort of minimizes the other work that's been done. And I also think it kind of sensationalizes weight loss in a way that, like, I don't want to make someone feel bad who hasn't, their before and after doesn't look that dramatic or whatever it may be. Like, I just don't want to, it's like the empath in me. Like, I worry more about how it's going to make someone else feel than myself.
Yeah.
Um, but very recently I was highly encouraged to post a before and after picture by one of my best friends, Mel Brown, who's one of our keto members. So I met her on Instagram,
Yeah.
and I'm like, like, it's not really my thing. I don't think I've posted before and after in like over a year. It's just not my thing.
Yeah.
But when we see a before and after picture in front of us on a screen, it's like that. It's like that outside of the glass moment where I was like,
Hmm.
oh, wait, that's me? Like, that's what people see? Not the
Yeah.
guy in the mirror with like the skin that's a little too saggy and right? Like,
Hmm.
um, being able to separate a little bit from like out of our body and out of our mind and just like see kind of what exactly are we talking about today. I know that was sort of like a roundabout way, but it's been a very powerful tool to me. I wish I had better like words to explain it, but it's really been something profound for me in a very subtle way. Is being able to identify, am I inside of the glass or outside of the glass window right now? And
Yeah.
pausing at that moment.
Yeah. And then I think also one of the things that I do is like when I get in that hypercritical state, I think like, would I say this to somebody that's like my best friend or my daughter or like a family member? And it's like always
Right.
absolutely not. And then it's like, if you wouldn't say that to somebody that you love, like you are someone that you love, like why do you think that it's okay to tear yourself down in that way that you would never give to somebody else? So it's like, really kind of being like, why am I treating myself like crap? Like, and I think for a lot of people, that negative voice has become so familiar that it's almost like this like really nagging, awful like voice in our head that we really have to learn to be like, stop. Like, this is not okay. This is not helping me. This isn't productive. Like, we got to figure out a way to, like, when it does pop up, because I don't think really for me, I don't think it will ever fully go away if I'm being honest. But
Right.
like I'm getting better at being like, Suzanne, knock it off. Like there's so many more important things about you than how much you weigh or what you look like or what your skin looks like. Like all these outside pressures of what we're supposed to be, like it's all silly. Like,
Yeah.
so that's a really helpful thing for me is just to kind of like get back in tune with like, don't say these things to yourself if you wouldn't say them to your daughter or your,
Yeah.
family.
Yeah. Oh my God, 100%. And the other thing is like we could work on ourselves, but I do think there's an environmental factor when we
Yeah.
think about kind of starting to identify toxicities perhaps in our life. And we hear that word a lot. And I think it's kind of like, it could be kind of a funny buzzword that
Yeah.
doesn't always like sound right. But there is truth in that like sometimes understanding ourselves, kind of a self-awareness and saying like, you know what, if this, whatever it is, if this thing in my life is starting to bother me, and we talk about toxicity in the sense of people a lot. I
Yeah.
think that there's environmental factors around toxicity. And like you had mentioned comparison earlier, that's a
Hmm.
huge one. And look, like if Instagram, for example, is something that gets you in your head, just you don't do it, step away.
Hmm.
If whatever it may be, if we find these triggers, it is okay not to do them. Like if there's something in your life that makes you get in those negative swirls, I think that it is okay to release that a little bit. I
Yeah.
don't know, I don't know if you feel that way, but it's helped
Oh,
me
I
as well.
I totally feel that way. Like I think that's one of the reasons why I love that Instagram, like on social media, like sometimes they have things where you can like hide people because it's like you don't want to not be friends or feel like there's any
Right.
animosity, but it's like maybe it's something that they're talking about is triggering to you or makes you feel not good enough or something. I think it's really good to be like, hey, this just isn't like, it's not bad on you, but like it makes me feel a certain way and like I'm just gonna put that mute button on. I think that's really healthy to do.
Yeah, for sure. And like, I'll give you a funny story because I'll ask you the same question because we're in this cookbook field. And I was so stressed before launching my cookbook about the Amazon reviews. I
Yeah.
was terrified because I put a lot of heart and soul into something. And then
Yeah.
here come the ability for anybody. It's like my heart. I used to put my heart on a plate. Now I put my heart on paper. And like now here anyone can come in and like basically define what my heart is in 5 stars or less.
Hmm.
And like
Totally.
again, as an emotional person, I was so stressed out before launching my book about these reviews.
Yeah.
Uh, and then I found a way of kind of dealing and accepting with that. It's the same thing with the sales. Like it's so funny. I got my 1 month sales report from my publisher and I haven't
Hmm.
opened it. I haven't opened the email and I
Like I don't
probably
want to see it.
never will. I don't care. Like,
Yeah.
what is this number going to do for me? If it's good, it's just going to put me in a space where I'm tying too much emotion around it. Like I didn't do this book for money or for sales. I did it because this is my passion. Like, what's this going to do to me? I'm going to like leave this out. My parents thought I was crazy. I forwarded them because my dad was so desperate to like, he's so curious and he
Yeah.
loves business and all that stuff. I forwarded it to my dad so he could read it, but I was like, don't tell me, don't react. Don't call me back and say like, Mike, it's still good. I'm not going to tell you, but it was good or bad. I don't want to know. It's like
Yeah.
that number's going to put my head in a spin. And it's the same thing. Okay, so has this been
Totally.
like a thing for you? Like, how do you deal with the Amazon reviews? Because like I can have 400 5-star best cookbook ever reviews, and one person says like, okay, cookbook, and I'm like losing sleep for 2 nights.
You know, I approach the cookbook reviews the same way that I approach social media in general. Is I think we all have a tendency of like we can have 500 people say how great something is and one person say like,
Right.
"Ugh, like not good." and you go to bed thinking about a one, like, not good. And it's like, why do we do that? Um, so I specifically don't like, I actually don't really look at the reviews a lot anymore. And if I do, I usually don't like, I'll click based on like the star basis, like, cause I'll be like, oh, I just want to like see what people are saying.
Yeah, same.
And
Yeah.
normally I just won't click on like the 1-star reviews. But I think one of the things that's helped me the most is like anybody who is going to go online and like tear somebody apart that they've been brave enough to put into the world, like you're not in the arena with me. And that's the whole thing that Brene, again, to bring her up, that,
Hmm.
kind of taught me is like, if you're not down putting yourself out there, being vulnerable, showing up, like your feedback can be your feedback, but like you're not in the arena with me. You're not being risky. You're not being vulnerable. So like your feedback is your feedback, but it doesn't pierce who I am, because like you're not in this, you know what I mean? Like it's like I can take constructive criticism, but you got to be in the arena with me. You got to be being brave too.
Interesting. It does take a lot of bravery to be online in general, like whatever
Tons,
that means. It's
tons.
pretty vulnerable.
Especially as like empaths, because I'm the same way. Like I feel everything. That's, I think that's one of the reasons why you and I love connecting with people so much, is because we really genuinely care and feel all the feels. Um, and a lot of people are like, oh, you have to have a thick skin. I'm like, I don't know what that's like. Like I like everything affects me, and I have to find a way to navigate it where I'm not just building a thick skin and not caring. Now, I think looking at it in the sense of like, are you being brave with your life too? No, then okay, like your feedback is not high level for me. That's the way that I do it, instead of being like, oh, it doesn't bother me at all. Because truthfully, like it does bother me to some degree. But like I can net out of like, you're not being brave. Like you may be going through something really bad at home and I feel sorry for you. Like
Hmm.
maybe there's a struggle that's really kind of triggering you, and like seeing someone else be successful or do something that you wanted to do. Like, who knows why people are the way they are? But I think if you can
Yeah.
kind of net out to like maybe having more feeling sorry for somebody instead of letting it like take away from you.
Well, and it does almost, I don't know if you feel this way, but like do you sometimes feel like the bigger audience you get, the easier it is for people to like just be jerks online or something? Because it's
Yeah.
like I don't understand that. Like
Yeah. It changes for sure. I mean, I remember when I first started and like barely had any followers and things like that. I feel like I could just kind of like spill everything out there. And I still am like very vulnerable and talk about like struggles and mental health, and like I talk about all the things on there. But I definitely feel like once your audience starts getting to a certain point, like you almost pull things apart, like we said earlier, of like you're so worried about how things are affecting everybody that like you overanalyze it to a point that it's like painful, and you lose some of the finesse of you just speaking from your heart. So it's very tricky, like I feel like I definitely like edit things more, and I'm like, is my sentence structure okay? I'm like, it is
right.
tough to like not get into that mode.
Yeah, it's interesting. And we see like even in the keto space specifically, which is funny because there's so many, you'd think we're all kind of on the same page on this, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of different ways to keto. We talk about that in this podcast and other ways. Like there's a lot of different ways to keto. It's
Yeah.
interesting, this sort of judgment that sometimes it feels like, you know, my keto is not going to be forever for everyone. And
I know.
that's a tricky, that's a tricky space to like exist in sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I was talking to Ryan Lowry about that today. Like, we were talking, he's like, what's the one thing that bugs you? I'm like, the thing that bugs me is like everyone trying to put people in a box. Like, the ketogenic
Mm,
diet is that you are in a state of ketosis, and people can eat a variety of things and be in that state of ketosis depending on your metabolic damage or your body. And like, we want to push people to figure it out, to dial it in for themselves. Like, it shouldn't be a one size fits all. Like, there aren't necessarily foods that are like keto or not keto. Like, we know certain things that are definitely going to kick you out, but some people can eat carrots and be fine. Like, we need to stop being like, that's not keto. That drives me
right.
crazy.
Yeah, 100%. No, 100%. How did you kind of start keto, because I'm going to go ahead and guess that your keto today is not what it was when you started. What did your journey look like? Like, what was your, specific kind of type of keto when you started? Not in these boxes, but you know what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
I found keto on Reddit, and I have kind of like an interesting tie-in with like progress pictures, like what you were saying earlier, because for me, I never looked at progress pictures and felt like, oh, this person's trying to say, like, look how great their life is now. Like, I was motivated by, like, whoa, here's somebody who struggles just like me. And like, look what they were able to like do to turn their life around. So I think you can look at it both ways for sure. Like, I think it could like motivate you or make you feel like really out of touch or like, this is going to be impossible for me. But for me, I saw someone's progress picture and I was like, holy crap, like, she's like similar age as me, similar height, similar weight, and she was able to do it. Like, she seems like normal. She's not trying to sell me anything. Like, maybe I'll just try it. And when I did that, I was like, wow, this is awesome. Cause after years of trying to lose weight, I was so tired of people trying to sell me something. I'm like, I
Hmm.
don't want your pills, your powders, your like, I just want to figure this out. Um, and I think in general, like, I was just like, I I just need to like do this and just like sink in. I started and stopped on the first day though. It was like my New Year's resolution and I was like, I'm gonna do this. And then I was like, but there's still food in the house from New Year's and like I don't want to waste it. Like,
Sure.
And then and then eventually 2 weeks later I restarted keto after that why moment happened that we talked about. And then I was like very strict. Like my first year, I literally tracked every single thing that I ate in my fitness pal. I was very, very structured. Like I would not have a cheat meal. Like you could not give me a bite of watermelon. Like there was none of that. And I think really it was just because I was so afraid that after I had momentum going, that I was going to just like totally fall off like before. And then eventually, like, I got to the place where I was like, okay, I need to have some flexibility. Like, when I go to Hawaii, I'm going to go out to dinner and have a meal that's not keto. Or if I go to the French Laundry, like, I'm not going to be like, oh, yeah, no, can you make my food all keto? Like, I'm not going to do that.
Right.
So I had to find like a happy balance, basically. And it took a while to get there.
Yeah, definitely. And like, to your point, I know people kind of say like super clean or dirty lazy. I really kind of think that there's a difference between like weight loss and diet mode versus just keto as a lifestyle. And I
Yeah.
think it's just important to kind of define that. Like, the sustainability around keto is there. You hear people
Yeah.
say like keto's not safe, it's not sustainable, whatever. And like, of course it's based on no fact, but the
Yeah.
point being, like, there's a big difference. Truthfully told, we can lose weight on any diet.
Yeah.
Like, weight
Calorie
loss is
deficit. Yeah.
yeah, there's a very like, but that's not sustainable.
No.
If you want to eat 1,000 calories a day for 6 months, you're going to lose some weight. You're also going to damage your metabolism.
You're
So
going to be burned out.
yeah, you're going to be mentally and physically weakened.
Yeah.
And literally there's metabolic damage that occurs when you do that. And so then when you go back to a normal way of eating, you're going to gain the weight back and then some. There's study after study that shows
Oh,
this.
yeah.
This is not like anecdotal. Like, this is proven. And so deficit based diets do lose weight quickly, in fact, if you just like are really strict about it. But then it's like,
Right.
actually finding a sustainable solution is a whole other discussion.
Yeah.
Just kind of curious where that played in for you. It sounded like you did a year of, though maybe it wasn't calorie deficit based, you were very clean, very strict, which is great. And if
Yeah.
anyone does that all the time, like, more power to you. I'm not that strong.
You know, one of the reasons why I found it so helpful to track was because it's like the most ironic thing ever. You would think that someone who had been like dieting their entire life would know a ton about nutrition at the end of it. And really, I knew nothing about any of the foods that I was eating or the effect on my body. So once I started learning about
Hmm.
like how keto works, I was like, whoa, like there's all these foods that I have no idea what they do in my body. I don't know if they have carbs or not. Like, so to me, it was like an education on nutrition. Like, I was like, wow, onions. Okay, I'm going to have to like not do those too much, or like, I was really learning like what was actually in food because I had no idea. After years and years of dieting, I knew nothing about nutrition. And that
Yeah,
was
well,
like a
there's no
really crazy
nutrition
thing.
education. There's really
Nope.
no education around this,
Yeah.
and often I think what our, this isn't a criticism of anybody, but like what our parents have been taught, sort of what's been taught in school, the food pyramid, and what's just been generally assumed knowledge,
Yeah.
is really obviously being understood now by a lot of communities is just being flagrantly false. Like it's just wrong.
Yeah. It's wrong,
So
and
getting
it's also
uneducated,
sponsored by like so many brands in like the low
right?
fat space, and it's like, oh, when you watch those documentaries, it's like painful.
It is. It is. Yeah, it is. And kind of uneducating yourself around that stuff, cuz like I was a vegetarian for so long, for 8 years, cuz I was convinced that was healthy.
Hmm.
And that's when I gained all my weight. Like I'm sure there's a way to do vegetarian and not gain weight. I'm sure a lot of people do. But for
Yeah.
me, with my body and my genetics and my eating habits, and just like I want to eat. And so in order to stay full on vegetables alone, for me, required so much food, basically. Like it,
Yeah.
whereas like fat is really satisfying. It's really filling. And so for my body, like I definitely found success just from, you know, getting out of that mindset of like, wait, I'm continuously trying to be healthy because I know that I'm overweight, so I'm going to be a
Yeah.
vegetarian and like get more unhealthy. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I did
And
the same thing. I was vegetarian for a bit and I just ate like tons of pasta and tons of bread. And I was
pasta,
like, nope, not gonna
yeah,
work for me.
yeah. That's really interesting. So I don't know. I guess this is an interesting kind of discussion, because it's like, how do we interweave this idea of sort of the mental and the mindset work with the diet? Because sometimes they don't overlap, in the sense that we don't want to be stressed. We want to find the self-love first, but at the same time, I like you tracked in the beginning. I had to be very strict for a while to
Yeah.
not only understand the food, but also um kind of get off the drug of food that I had had my whole life. Kind of like I
Yeah.
needed some structure in order to kind of kick the addiction a little bit.
Yeah.
And
That
that
is such a
alone
good
is a mind
point.
fuck.
It is
Yeah.
because if you think about any other addiction, I mean, I'm not saying that it's easy, but like you don't have to drink alcohol, you don't have to gamble, you don't have to smoke. Like all these other addictions,
Hmm.
you don't have to do to live, but like with a food addiction, like you have to eat. So it's kind of like here's a little bit of your drug, do good with it. It's
Every
a
day.
really it's crazy.
Hmm. I never thought about it that way at all. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, like that doesn't minimize the the challenge of any addiction, especially drug addiction,
Yeah.
because it really is
Yeah.
such a chemical thing as well.
It-
But
Totally.
you're right, it's like we're forced, we have to do this. That's interesting. I've never really thought of it that way, but you're
Yeah, because
right.
I mean,
It's
like,
like
I can only imagine like how difficult it is to struggle with like any addiction. But like when you do look at food addiction, you're like, you actually have to have the thing that you're addicted to survive. Like it's kind of it's a crazy moment when you're like, huh. No wonder
yeah,
people struggle with this so much.
yeah, I just had that moment. um
Hmm.
so it is empowering though, and I want to kind of use you as an example, because you just said, you've been speaking about this, we've been there, you've been very open about the fact that you probably never saw any of these things coming in your life. And
Yeah.
I very much feel like I could say the sentence, keto changed my life, keto started this whole new world for me, but I don't, that would not be true. There was a moment, like I said, when I was at rock bottom, and I said to myself, like, now it's time to do something for myself. I sort
Hmm.
of made a decision that while I don't love myself today, I'm going to actually and actively work towards developing self-love.
Right.
And that started me on this journey. But then what's interesting from there is sort of where it goes. And so um after I didn't tell anybody, I didn't start Instagram. It wasn't a public thing. It was never in my plans to do any of that. And then I was sort of pushed. My fiance was like, you got to share this food. It might inspire somebody. And then
Yeah.
months after that, like Gordon Ramsay's producer is calling me, like things just go for
You're
crazy
like,
twists and
what?
turns. And kind of same with you a little bit, right? Like in the sense that what started as doing something for yourself has now really turned into a really vibrant career. What has that felt like? And because I want to move into some of the new things that you're up to, because I want to learn a little bit about this, because I've danced with the idea of like starting a food product, and I'm nowhere. Uh, I haven't done anything with it yet, but I want to get into that. But before we do, just emotionally speaking, what has this sort of been like to be on this ride where like you didn't intend on any of this, but here you are? At what point did you get this book deal offer? And you're like, oh my God, what the hell is happening? Because that's been how it's felt with me. Like, what the hell is happening?
Yeah. I felt really conflicted for a long time about what to do, because the first 2 or 3 years that I was on Instagram, I was doing all this stuff and filming YouTube videos every weekend and doing all this stuff of outreach to like connect with other people. And I didn't make a dime doing any of it. And I was okay with that because I was like, hey, this is what I love and I love talking about. But then, of course, you reach a point of like, I either need to be able to like pay my bills and do all this stuff, or I need to like go back to like ultrasounds, like, and do like my job. And so I was like, gosh, like, I don't really want to do that. Like, I love what I'm doing, but I also like know that I will need to like monetize in order to do this full time. So, I'm always like very driven by ethics. So, like, if I'm doing anything, like, it has to pass like the ethics test. I don't care how much money it is. Like, I've turned down crazy offers because it didn't pass my ethics test, and I don't regret it for a day of my life. So I
Thank you,
always
by the way.
lead, yeah. So I always lead with that. Like, that's my mission. And if I ever lose sight of my mission, I lose sight of everything. Like, that's just the way that I look at it. Like, um, so that's actually like probably the easiest part of it. And then when I was approached to write a book, Jimmy Moore actually recommended me to Victory Bell. And when they called me, I was like, you must have like the wrong number. Like, I wasn't growing up loving to cook. I've never dreamed of writing a cookbook. Like, I don't even know what I'm doing. Like, and my husband's like, well, maybe you should though. Like, you could totally do it. And I'm like, yeah, actually, maybe like I could do this. Like, I want to help people. My inbox is flooded. I can't keep up with it anymore. And I feel like everything that's out there is just like too complicated and too, just not easy to understand. So I was like, okay, Simply Keto. Like, let me put a simple guide. I can help a lot of people, and just go forward with that. So I wrote Simply Keto. And then after that, I was like, okay, like, everything's changed. Like, I guess this is what I'm doing now. But it definitely was like an adjustment getting to that point.
And after Simply Keto, you had some big press stuff.
Yeah.
As kind of, I'm kind of with you here. Like I never intended on TV, and so like it's been a long battle with like some of the public nature of what I do and going on TV and
Yeah.
some of this stuff. How's that been? I think you were on like Good Morning America or something. You've done some cool stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it was nerve-wracking, for sure. Like, it was definitely not something that I was excited to go, but I was like, oh my gosh, like, how is this going to be, and how am I going to do, and what if I mess up? But again, it's like you do that one thing that's scary and you're like, oh, that actually wasn't that bad. And I had fun, and like, I'm capable of doing things that are scary, and not everything is going to come in like this pretty, packaged thing. Like, some stuff is going to scare the crap out of you, and you do it anyway. And then it gets easier to do the next thing after that.
Yeah. Well, speaking of scary, you are starting a business.
Yeah.
That is scary. I've done that before a couple
Yeah.
times. It is scary, and expensive, and it takes a long time and a lot of work. So I would love to take an opportunity to hear about this. So you're starting a company. It's called Defy Foods or Defy
Yeah.
Foods,
It's
right?
Defy Foods. Hmm.
Defy Foods, cheddar crackers, which I have been very lucky enough to taste shortly before launch, and they're fantastic. And I just can't imagine it. And we've had a few phone calls about this too, just like privately. But
Yeah.
uh, can you kind of give us a little bit of like behind the scenes here? What does this process look like to go to zero to product launch?
Yeah, especially during a pandemic, it looks pretty crazy. Um,
Hmm.
I mean, I'm working on this with my best friend, which, of course, like there's always this thing of like, don't go into business with your best friends. But I honestly couldn't imagine doing it with anyone else. Like we have strengths in like different areas that each other have like weaknesses in. Like we offset each other really well. We're super honest and vocal. Like we don't hold anything back. We keep the lines of communication open, and like she's my best friend, so it's like so exciting that every day I get to call her and work with her on something. It's been really hard. It's been like a whole new world. I thought writing a book was hard, and then like we did the food company and I was like, okay, like leveling like up to what is like really really hard. It's basically like learning a whole new language, a whole new industry. And then like the one industry has like 10 components of like ingredients, suppliers and manufacturers and 3PL for shipping, and then like the legal side of things and the certifications. Like it's literally so complex.
Hmm.
But we're really passionate about offering better options, especially for people who are busy and working and they just want something to grab. Like I always still say, like eat whole foods as much as you can, but along with the progress, not perfection. Like sometimes I just want to like throw some crackers or a snack into my daughter's lunch or my lunch when I'm in a hurry. So I think it's like making space for both.
Yeah. Well, and it's not as easy as it seems, right? Like it's not as simple as, well, let me make a cracker recipe and then like
Yeah.
send it to some factory, right? Like
Yeah.
when as somebody, as a culinarian in that sense, like food is really different when it needs to be number one, sort of made in bulk, number two,
Yeah.
automated in process, and then number
Hmm.
three, kind of getting shelf stabilization.
Yeah.
And you want to do this, I'm assuming, in a way that is health conscious and stuff. So um just in the sort of recipe development, I'm overwhelmed. Like, I'm just curious about the process of like, was this just a lot of trial and error? Did you have anybody that could help you from like the shelf stabilization side? Because I wouldn't even know where to begin with that.
Yeah, I mean, so we started with like our home recipe and then quickly learned that there was no way to produce that like
Right.
in a larger scale.
I had a
Uh,
feeling you would say
y-
that.
yeah. But it's a struggle because like then you see why I think a lot of brands have good intentions of like having the smallest amount of ingredients and all these things. And then like you get into a place where you need to change the ingredients, but then you have this battle. Like you still want the ingredients to be like really good, but then they're going to cost more money, and then are people going to see the value in that costing more money? And then like all this trial and error of now testing in a brand new recipe. But I've been really fortunate that I have some really great friends who are in the food space. And one of the great things is everyone is like so like giving and sharing of information. So I was so fortunate to have people say like, "Hey, have you tried this? Or have you thought about this?" Or like we're really like in this great community of like let's pull each other up, and like when you get to the top, turn around and help someone else. And that's like the way that I live with this too. So it's like as soon as I learn something, I'll turn around and try to help someone else behind me. So I think with that method, like we all rise to the top.
It's like Jimmy Moore getting you to victory belt for your book and
Yeah.
yada 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 goes on. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really cool. It's definitely commendable. I mean, I know how busy you are. I barely handle like the projects that I have going on, and I don't really know how you do it. So I think that's really amazing. I love watching you shine and like just watching you kind of get out there and kick ass. It's
Thank
obviously a
you.
lot of work, a lot of risk, both kind of personal and financial, I assume, to start a business as somebody who's been
Yeah.
there in other um other disciplines or whatever you want to say. But I'm really excited for you. The new packaging is gorgeous. I'm very
Thank
excited for your
you.
launch. This is so cool.
Yeah, it's definitely been a lot, especially with like now with the pandemic and everything, we're homeschooling. So it's been definitely interesting, like juggling all of the hats and definitely working late a lot of nights, but I think it will all be worth it.
Well, I am your biggest fan,
Oh,
and I'm
thank
so
you.
lucky that we've been able to be friends.
Yeah, me
I
too.
look forward to many more of our just like phone calls and stuff. This is very exciting. And, for anybody listening, where can they find you and where can they find Defy?
So mine is ketokarma.com or on all social media, it's at ketokarma. And then Defy is just defyfoods.com. And then on all social media at Defy Foods.
Amazing. And please, guys, make sure you check out. I really think, especially if you're starting keto, this really is the book to go to. Simply
Thank you.
Keto, everywhere books are sold. And your second book, Beyond Simply Keto, is a continuation with just as much amazing stuff. You put them together, you have everything you need. But you know what might go even well alongside of those is maybe this book too.
Hmm.
New keto cooking.
Yep.
No, this isn't about me today. Suzanne, I'm really excited. Definitely, guys, if you're listening to this, please make sure to check out her products. I'm not just kidding. I'm not paid to say this. Those Defy crackers are insanely good. So I'm really excited for people to get their hands on them because it is one of those things like I miss Cheez-Its and some of these things. So
Yeah.
I can't wait to get my order. Thank you so much for being here, Suzanne. This is a pleasure as always. I hope to have you back soon.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me.
I appreciate it. Guys, stay tuned. Join me over at Patreon. I'm going to kick her off screen, cut her out of the camera, and then talk to you guys and reflect just a little bit about what we just heard, just me and you. And so after I kick her out, join me over at patreon.com/Chef Michael. And of course, there's more information about this episode. I'll put some links to her stuff and all that kind of good stuff over at chefmichael.com/podcast. And that's Chef-Michael, because like I say, some asshole owns chefmichael.com. So chef-michael.com/podcast for more information. I love you guys. Thank you so much for being here. And thanks so much to our sponsor, Redmond Salt, for providing support for this podcast. Make sure you guys go to redmond.life with the discount code Chef Michael for 15% off so you can stock up on all your salty needs. It really is the best salt in the game. Thank you guys so much. And I'll see you guys on the next episode. Bye.